Hello everybody, welcome to 1v1 Boss Rush Game Show that celebrates our friends and their creativity. I'm your host this week, Corey Dierig, and joining me is very wonderful, very talented Mallory Kuhn.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. This is very exciting because we kind of just talked to you briefly the last couple of days. Honestly, I found you through Celeste and another Zelda podcast group, and you were kind of suggested as somebody I should follow. I was like, okay, why not? And then you followed me back. I said, thanks and follow all that good stuff because I'm trying to be a nice person on the internet. God forbid, you know.
You guys are rare, you nice people on the internet.
Yeah, we exist, I promise. But you know, I saw that you were a writer, and I was kind of intrigued. I was like, oh, you're a writer? And we kind of just started talking, and this episode kind of happened very quickly. I put it together very quickly, and very happy to have you. Not just because you're a Zelda fan, but because you are a writer, and we are here to eventually talk about your very first book.
Yes, I'm super excited that you guys invited me on. This is awesome.
Yeah, so if people don't know who you are, who are you? What do you do besides write awesome fantasy works?
Yeah, so my name's Mallory. I go by MJ Kuhn on in print and most of the internet. That's what you'll find me under. So other than writing, my day job, so writing doesn't pay a ton of bills off the bat. Like a lot of creative endeavors, right?
That's fair.
So I do still have a day job. I work at a university, assistant registrar. So I do a lot of stuff with student records and diplomas and degree.
Oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so bad, right? Administer a degree audit software thing. So that's what I do during the daytime. And then, writing on the weekends and in the evenings. Other than writing and working, I do a lot of reading. I like kickboxing a lot. That's super fun. And then video games, obviously. Why else would I be involved with another Zelda podcast if I wasn't?
Yeah, I saw that.
A video game obsessed person as well.
Yeah, I saw your Ocarina of Time shirt. It was very...
oh, yes.
I was like,
yeah,
yes, she should hang around more often. I like this person a lot. So... I don't
collection of nerdy t-shirts.
Yeah, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you believe. If you wear a Zelda shirt, you're fine. You're okay in my book.
We're in. We have enough common ground to have a chat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, so speaking of another Zelda podcast, what do you do over there? You were on the Zelda quiz show the other day. I was listening to that because, I honestly only found the show a week ago when I was talking to Celeste, and I found it. And I've been listening to it, and I'm like, oh man, because one of the things I really like is lore type stuff in games.
Yes.
And Zelda has a lot of lore. There's I'm a big Destiny fan, and there's a YouTube channel that I frequent called My Name is Bife, and it's all about the lore in Destiny. And then I'm like, well, I'm a huge Zelda fan. I would like to listen to some Zelda lore because a lot of people who like Zelda, I'm sure they don't know a lot about the ins and outs of the series, and I'm sure many people, I haven't played all the Zelda games, but I like the series, I enjoy.
Yeah, I haven't played all the games either, and that's super obvious if you listen to the quiz show episode. So yeah, folks out there, if you do check out that episode and you're a giant Zelda fan, please don't judge me too harshly. The questions were really hard.
Yeah, some of them were difficult. I was like, I don't know if I know that either.
Yes, but we didn't see the questions beforehand, so which obviously makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're answering in the form of a quiz show, but it was the ones that the facts were really easy in the moment. We're like, oh my gosh, I don't know with the camera on me. I don't know the answer to that right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I write blogs for them. That was actually, so I started just as a fan of the show. So I just tweeted them a whole bunch, and eventually they started talking to me. So, there you go.
Yeah.
And they invited me to come and write But then one of the hosts for the show, so the two hosts for the Zelda podcast are Kate and David, and they're both awesome. And Kate had to go on hiatus this year. So it has been calling in a lot of the blog writers and other members of the community to fill in on some episodes. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm I'm going to be on a podcast. All right then. So it's been kind of fun.
Yeah, and you said that was your first podcast, that episode?
Yeah, that was my first ever podcast episode I ever recorded. This microphone that I have right here is one that that David sent to my husband and I so that we could record that episode because I didn't have any recording equipment. I had never done anything like this before. But I had a great time with it. It was super fun. Would recommend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, you're like the third person I've met in the last 3 weeks that's like, we had our friend Carl came on one of our shows a couple weeks ago, and that was his first podcast. And if you would have told me that was his first podcast, I would have told you you're lying. I've met 3 people like that. Yeah, I've met 3 people, including you, like that the past 3 weeks. I'm like, those people do exist. Because I remember my first podcast, and I was a guest on somebody else's, and it was not very good. So
I am sure it was not at all as bad as you think it was to an outside viewer.
No, it was pretty bad. I'm not going to lie to you. Because I did it with some people that I didn't really know. I had just started. At the time, I was literally just starting. I started a Nintendo kind of blog type thing, and I was writing about Nintendo, and I wanted to start a podcast, and I'm like, well, I can't start a podcast by myself. That's weird. I kind of was searching around for people to do one with me, and I was like, I don't even know how to podcast. What am I doing here? And they saw some stuff I was writing, actually, and they're like, hey, do you want to come on and talk about what you're writing? I'm like, talk about what I'm writing. Why can't you just read it? But I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I went on. I was like, wow, I did bad. But they invited me back like 3 weeks later, so I guess it was...
See, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah. So, and we're still friends today. They don't really podcast anymore all that much, but it was a good time. So, but yeah, I couldn't believe that was your first podcast, and I actually had the same conversation with Celeste last week too. So I was like, oh man, some people just can do it. I was talking to my wife today. I was like, I'm doing an interview podcast, and I've done a lot of these, but some, like, this is like a person that's not really in our kind of like people that we pull from to do stuff, and I'm like, I'm kind of nervous.
A stranger.
She's like, why? You've been doing this ever since I've known you. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you'll be fine.
Yeah. She's like, just don't be loud. I'm like, okay.
Don't be loud.
Yeah. Sometimes when it's not this type of show, it gets kind of rowdy in here. So,
I can see that.
Yeah.
Just get passionate discussions about video games. Kinda. It happens.
Yeah. So, but before we get into, your writing and stuff, Zelda, you said you're a huge Zelda fan.
Yeah.
History with the series. What's your favorite Zelda game?
Oh my gosh. So I have trouble picking an actual favorite. So
that's fair.
I think I say Wind Waker's my favorite a lot, but I think I have some like nostalgic bias there. Mm-hmm. So the GameCube was my first ever gaming system. Oh, that's a good I was one. Like a late comer to the gaming thing.
Yeah.
So Wind Waker was my first Zelda game that I ever played. And then every time I go back and replay it, like I do enjoy it, but every time I'm like, I don't think this is actually my favorite. I think it's just warm fuzzies that I get playing it.
Yeah.
But like Majora's and Twilight Princess are the other two that I usually say are my favorites up there. Twilight Princess just because of the story and the the art style, it's really cool. Mm-hmm. And then Majora's just because it's totally different and off the wall, and I love that. So
yeah, I honestly, besides Breath of the Wild, I agree with everything you just said. Twilight Princess is, like, besides Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess is my favorite Zelda game. It came out at the right time for me. Sometimes you go through some things in life, and there's just that one thing that sticks out that like kind of distracts you from it and really pulls you back into like what's important and what's real. And that game kind of did that for me. I know that some people have some issues with the beginning and kind of the stuff that happens between like the dungeons and stuff, but I really love the style, the characters, the story. Really,
the best guide character in all of Zelda canon.
Yeah.
I will fight anyone that says otherwise.
Yeah, Midna is great.
The best.
She's the best. Her. Actually, I don't know if you have this or not, which you probably should if you're a fan.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
I love it. Yes.
Yeah. So, it's part of my nerd shelf.
Your collection. I know mine's all at my like real work office, and I haven't been there since March, so I'm like missing my collection of pops to look at while I work.
Yeah. I this is actually all kind of recent. I kind of moved our office around, but this is kind of like my square of the office, and it's been a project for sure. But it's it's good to have stuff that inspires you around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But we're not really here to talk about games, even though this is a gaming channel. We're here to talk about you and your writing, and how did you begin down the path of writing? Like, how did you just kind of sit down one day and were like, I think I'm going to write a book? Did you start writing blogs? Did you like write in journals? Did you what I mean, just scribble stuff in your notebook in school instead of learning like I did? Like
Yeah, well, I did a lot of that last one. No, I like probably half the writers in like the world would say this in half and like staple them together and write little books when I was, in elementary school and stuff. I've only been writing seriously since about 2014. So like when I was a kid, it was my dream career, right? I want to be a writer. I want to be an author. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere along high school, college, I was like, that's not realistic. And so I, picked a different major and, got a steady, stable job kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then like I started working in HR right after college, and probably like a month into that first job, I was like, yeah, like
that's what my wife
like
does.
Fuck this day job stuff. Yeah, like I don't think I want to do this forever, So then I was like, okay, I'm going to start writing again. And that was when I started writing my first novel. So I say 2014 is when I started writing seriously, because that's when I actually started writing books and started finishing books, which is the biggest piece of, being a writer, is actually finishing stuff.
Yeah. Well, I have a whole drawer over there full of unfinished things that I've written and ideas, and I'm sure you have a huge stack somewhere like that too.
Yes, like on this bookshelf back here, it's like tucked behind the books.
Yeah,
it's just a pile of loose papers like this tall. Yes.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So you said you started writing seriously in 2014. Like, how did you just kind of decide that you were I'm just gonna sit down, I'm gonna put my nose to the grindstone, I'm just gonna try to finish something? Was it I mean, some of my friends that are writers are like, well, if we're writing a short story, like I'll try to write a couple short stories in a month or something and try to get, my brain moving, and then, maybe I'll just move forward. Like my cousin actually just published his first book about 2 years ago.
Exciting.
It's called The Killers. It was really, really good. It kind of was like it took the idea of Dexter, the show Dexter, and turned it into like a situation where they all were serial killers, but they were all orphans, and a kind of like it was like a serial killer orphanage, but they all went out and only killed bad people.
Okay.
It was a really cool concept, and I know he's working on like an anthology to that and like a sequel at some point. But it was a really, really great first book for him, and I remember when we were really little. He's about 5 years younger than me, and when I was probably in high school and he was somewhere in middle school, like I remember going over to their house and he was sitting at their kitchen table writing like Harry Potter and X-Men fan fiction, and he was like, I want to write a book someday. I'm like, you do that, buddy. I don't know many people who can do that, but he did it, and I'm like, I mean, I don't want to like, I'm not talking bad about my family or anything, but like, we don't really like do a great job of like finishing things that we start and like getting to the point where like we want to do this, but you know, kind of not very motivated to like chase the dream. You know, there's very few times where I've seen my family actually do that, and I was really proud of him for doing that. And we had his book sponsor our show for 2 months, I think, and it was it was exciting because a lot of our fans actually reached out and said, "Hey, that book that you're promoting is really good."
And you're like, yes, it is.
I was like, yes, it is. It's very good. So, but yeah, I mean, sorry to get back to you. This isn't sorry, but what did you just sit down and like write a short story? Did you like come up with characters and kind of weave a story around them? Like, how did you decide to just put your nose to the grindstone and do it?
Yeah, I honestly kind of don't remember honestly what it was that kind of pushed me. Mm-hmm. But I do vividly remember coming home from work one day and like waving, like, because I'd just been jotting notes, you know, in between tasks at work, and like waving this little piece of scrap paper in my husband's face and being like, I'm gonna write my novel, like it's happening finally. So I honestly, like, that idea was absolute trash, and it it is not the book that's being published. Like it went nowhere. But like, it's one of those things, like the only way to learn how to write a book is to write a book. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know what made me just keep going. But I did. I just kept plugging on through it, you know, jotting some notes down on paper and, you know, taking them to the computer, typing them up. And like I said, it was not good. It was not good at all. It was very bad. The writing was weak and the plot was pretty nonsensical, but like I finished it, you know, I made it from chapter 1 to the end, which is, I think, like the biggest thing, especially for like a first draft. It's gonna be bad. Even like the first drafts I'm working on right now, and I'm a better writer than I was in 2014, I hope. But like the first draft I'm working on right now is bad. Like, and it will be. That's why you edit, right? So I think just understanding that, like, okay, you know what? I don't care if it's bad. I'm just going to keep plugging on, and I'll finish fixing it up later. That's probably what made me finally just like, I'm just going to finish this draft, and then we'll take it from there. Yeah.
How many books have you finished that quote unquote weren't good?
Yeah. So, well, because you'd sent me some of the questions beforehand, and I was like, one of them was like, how long did it take you to settle on an idea or something? Yeah. And I was like, that's a difficult question to answer, because so Among Thieves, which is going to be my debut novel that's actually being published, is the 5th novel I've written. So I queried 2 of those. So in the publishing process, for those folks that aren't familiar, for most publishers, so like if you want like a big name publisher, basically if you want to like go to Barnes and Noble and see your book on the shelf, most of those publishers only accept agented submissions. So before you can try to get the publisher, you have to get represented. And how you do that is basically sending cold call emails to a bunch of agents with like, here's what my book's about, please want to represent it. Right. Yeah. So
those cold call emails are really oh my gosh.
I feel that. And then they take like, a while to get back to you because 700 other people emailed them this week, and you're just sitting there waiting for that buzz. Yeah. Oh my goodness. But yeah, so that first terrible book that I was talking about that was really, really bad, I was bold and I was confident and I was ready to go, and I queried that one, and I'm so embarrassed that I queried that one at this point, because it was very bad. And shocker, I got all no's across the board from every agent that I sent it to. Sorry, agents that I sent it to, because it wasn't ready. Right. And a lot of people do that, I'm sure, where they're like, yes, my first book, I did it, send. And then after that, I wrote 2 more, and I knew those 2 weren't ready based on my experience from the first one. So my 4th book was the one I actually got my agent on. So I queried that one, and I got an offer of rep, and signed with my incredible agent. His name is Abby. She's awesome. Hi, Abby. She's going to watch this, I'm sure. And then we went on submission with that project, and none of the publishers said yes to that one. So yeah, Thieves is my 5th book I've written. 2nd one I've subbed. 3rd one that I have put out into the world at all.
That's awesome though. I mean, at least like I told you, I was like, I wish I could just like sit down and like, just write one, and you've done 5, and that's like incredible. You know, I mean, even if you say they weren't good, like that's still like such a milestone to finish one, let alone 5. So
yeah, it's addicting. I'm serious, because you were talking that you want to, you know, when we were talking on Twitter a little bit, you were talking that you want to like actually get in there and you know, maybe finish one of, once you catch it, you won't be able to stop. So you'll write one, and you know, you have to write another one just because you got another idea and now you want to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I don't think that any of the books that were bad were like wasted time or anything. It's like necessary. You're teaching yourself, you know, figuring out what works for you and what doesn't, and you know, I don't know.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, like I told you in our chat, I was like, I've had this idea for a character and kind of like a story revolving around this character for like a long time, probably close to a decade. Like before I even met my wife, I had this idea, and I have, you know, a folder that says new project on it that's that's followed me from like 3 computers over.
Oh no!
Yeah. So
do it.
I know.
You got this.
I want to, and you know, I just talking to you and Celeste and our somebody we work with, Carl, and just even my co-hosts on our other shows, it's just, and even like a bunch of people around the internet. Like I sent out a tweet right before we started recording and tagged like everybody who's been such an inspiration for me the last, you know, not just few weeks but like few years, honestly, doing this. And I think it's time. I've started one new project this past week that I've been wanting to do probably for 2 years. I started, and now this writing thing is like, I think I'm gonna take some time this week or this weekend and just sit down and even if it's just like an hour, just get something on a page and go.
Just get started. But it's like, people are always like, I don't have time to write a book. Well, like, obviously no one does, you know.
It's a book.
But you know, the great thing about writing a book is that, like, okay, if you write 5,000 words in a day, like, yeah, you're going to write a book. But if you write 200 words in a day and you do that enough times, guess what? You're also going to write a book.
Yeah.
So, you know, you just chip away at it.
Yeah. So I think I'm ready to do that. It's scary. Like it's scary to like, because I opened my laptop and I opened that document for the first time, so much so that I had to like update like, you know, like sometimes you have these old files that don't work on newer versions of these programs that I had to like copy and paste it into a notepad to move it over almost. It was just like, what is happening?
Oh my gosh. You're like, oh, it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Hello, old friend. But just before we kind of get into your book, what books inspired you to create this book that you have written now? Like what are some of the inspirations? What are some of your favorites? What are maybe some bad books that had good ideas that you really just loved? Yeah,
so I'm a huge fantasy nerd. I read some sci-fi as well, and I mean, I've read some contemporary stuff too, and you know, whatever. But I pretty much live in the fantasy realm. So most of my favorites are all fantasy. One that is, I'm probably pretty basic to say, but A Song of Ice and Fire. So George R. R. Martin, Game of Thrones.
I've heard of that. I've heard of that.
Yeah, but I think maybe someone talked about it once for like 7 straight years and never shut up about it.
I think there was like an indie show on some network.
Yeah, like
nobody's ever heard of.
Super low key, low budget, no special effects.
None.
Yeah.
Puppets, I hear.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that one is a favorite series of mine. Lord of the Rings is a bit, you know, old school, kind of dense. But it's a masterclass in world building. Is the thing I really like about Lord of the Rings.
That's probably my favorite thing about just stories in general, is like good world building. You know, I mean,
yeah, it feels like a world I can live in, or I can really imagine. I mean, like, God, J.R.R. Tolkien invented whole languages.
Right. Right.
He went a little overboard, in my opinion, but it's awesome. So that's why Lord of the Rings kind of makes my list. There's, some like childhood favorites, like Redwall. I don't know if you ever read the Redwall series. I
have not.
Yeah, I would say I read it in like 3rd grade. It was the first fantasy book I ever picked up, and I kind of just never stopped reading fantasy after that. It's it's a bunch of woodland creatures armed with swords and like fighting battles and stuff. Super nerdy in the best way. And then like I read a lot of young adult stuff too. So in the kind of like modern fantasy space, there's a lot of really, really quality young adult books. So a favorite modern one, An Ember in the Ashes. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It has some of the most beautiful character work that I've seen maybe ever. It's a whole series. There's 3 books of it out so far. But yeah, so that's like just some general books that I really like. For Among Thieves specifically, so Among Thieves is a heist novel. And I was mostly inspired to write it by a book. It's called The Lies of Loch Lamora. It's by Scott Lynch. Again, if you aren't familiar, or if any of the viewers or listeners aren't familiar, like check it out. It's awesome. It has some of the smartest characters I've ever read. I was obsessed with it in high school, and then I read it again in college, and I was still obsessed with it. And actually, it was super cool when my deal announcement went out for Thieves. Scott Lynch commented on my Twitter to congratulate me, and
amazing.
I almost died.
That's amazing.
I was like, I took a screenshot and I sent it to my agent, with just a bunch of exclamation points, oh my god. So yeah.
That's always fun when people you kind of look up to in the space comment on Twitter. I mean, I think as terrible as social media is, that side of social media is very kind of uplifting and inspiring. I remember at one point we were talking about Batman at some point, I think, and I said, yeah, Mark Hamill has, we were talking about Heath Ledger and just the different portrayals of Joker. I forget exactly what the conversation was, but I was like, I think in terms of voice and just creating an atmosphere within the character, Mark Hamill probably does the best job at creating the Joker. And he was he liked my tweet and commented and said, why, thank you. And I was like, oh my gosh, Mark Hamill commented on my, I was like, man, I know. I was like, Luke Skywalker, talk to me. I'm going to go just
going to go stare at the wall.
I'm going to go frame this tweet on my wall now, guys. I'm just going to leave it over there. I want everybody to know.
I would too.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's awesome. But yeah, that is the good side of social media. Mm-hmm. There's obviously some downsides, but there's some good to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think the one that, for me at least, is growing up, I was a huge fan of the Ninja Turtles, and Rob Paulson, voice actor, Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs, Ninja Turtles. I had this picture signed by one of the original artists on the show, on the show, and he commented, he's like, I know that guy because he played Raph on the original Ninja Turtle show. And I was like, oh my gosh,
you're like, oh my gosh.
Twitter's okay sometimes. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
This is why I come back to this Bluebird platform.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. So, but yeah, as you were kind of looking for inspiration for this, is there anything else outside of writing or outside of reading your favorite books and exploring that? Has that influenced you? Any TV, movies? I mean, I know that stuff is very kind of out there and pretty. You can find anything you really want now with Netflix and Hulu and Disney and all this stuff. So, I mean, anything weird or quirky or I mean, even blockbustery that inspired you to write this book?
Well, I don't know that there's any specific ones. I will say that when I was learning, teaching myself how to write and learning about story structure and whatever, mm-hmm. Studying screenwriting methods and mm-hmm. studying movies and film was super helpful because
mm-hmm.
it's just easier to digest sometimes the concept of a story arc or something when you're watching it.
Yeah.
I will say that I originally pitched this novel idea to my agent as Ocean's 11 meets Game of Thrones.
That's awesome.
A movie and a TV show together. So
I mean, sign me up. I would that sounds like something I would read. Yeah, like have you ever watched a movie with like sometimes Amazon has where you can read the script as the movie's playing at the bottom?
Oh, no, I've seen people do like screen grabs of that online before where they'll post it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, especially not so much like movies and stuff because there's like a lot on the page for like one scene, right? But if you're watching a half-hour TV show or an hour TV show and you just kind of see it scroll down, it's really interesting to see it like here's what the words were originally and here's what's happening on screen, and you can like look at like oh man, how did, as somebody who went to school for art, I always try to when I read stuff, I always try to see it in my head. And you know, my wife is a very like, she likes to do things herself and she'll see it when it's done, whereas like I can kind of picture it in my head before it's done, whether we're, you know, like our office space, for example, like we were kind of redoing it. Like I knew how I wanted it and what it was going to look like. And when you kind of just have stuff in the middle of the room, she's like, what is that? And I was like, don't worry about it, you know? And you know, as I kind of went through art, like I kind of see things before, you know, I know what I want it to look like in the end, and I can kind of see it while I'm doing it, you know, and, you know, I just like that kind of process, seeing those words transferred to the screen is really cool.
We can see like what cues and like how the actors interpreted them, and that would be very cool.
Yeah. So it's a lot of influence from TV and movies for me, I think, and even games at this point tell interesting stories.
Oh my gosh, you know, yeah, some of them are basically like watching a movie. Like, I mean, I think Mass Effect has a stronger storyline than like most of the films out. Not most, but a lot of films out. These days, right. Like it's solid. It is solid.
Yeah. I can hear our audience just kind of like being excited that you just brought up Mass Effect, because it's like it's something that's a series that we talk about often, and like they're talking about remaking that first game coming out this year or next year, which is, that story is really good, but the game
mechanics are just a bear. Yes, I know. That's why I like whenever I replay the series, like I have the DLC that like I can do the choices from one, so that I don't have to play with Reeve instead of Rex, because boo. Right. But yeah, I always start with 2 because I don't want to deal with the gameplay in 1.
So yeah, I mean, like even you know, a game that a lot of people are looking forward to that'll be out by the time this episode airs is The Last of Us. Is a game that a lot of people love, and you know, that's, you can get a lot out of games these days with like motion capture and just the scripts in general that kind of come out after the game comes out, and you watch post-morts on them and stuff. It's fascinating. Do games inspire you at all? I know we're not really talking about games, but like, you know, has that ever been like an influence on anything that you've written?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, honestly, not that I've written like so far, but I will say that I like have a soft spot in my heart that I want to write a space opera someday, largely because of Mass Effect, actually. You know, it's just one of those things that, you know, you see something that's a little different. It's not, you know, it's not Star Wars, you know, but it's a whole universe of things. It's a little darker, and, you know, which is more my brand of writing.
I that's what I liked about Mass Effect, is like everybody always is the quintessential space opera is Star Wars, or even, you know, Star Trek to an extent, I guess. But there's something about Mass Effect it's there. It's good. It's great. I like how dark it is. I like the choices that you make. I like sometimes pushing people out the window when they're being dicks, you know.
Go first.
You know.
Right trigger. Go.
Right. Right.
Renegade move.
My guy's not all bad, but if you're going to be angry, I'm going to push you out a window. That's all I'm going to say.
Right. I know I always try to go all renegade because I like making Shep's eyes glow and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's some that like I just can't do it. Even though the characters aren't real. They're just pixels on a screen, but I can't.
I know. Sometimes you just gotta do it. How did you go about creating the world? Like, characters are one thing, but we talked a little bit about world building. How did you go about creating the world that you're book is set in, you know, because it's just by your excerpt on your website and everything, and just from us talking, it sounds really unique, and you know there are some elements of familiarity, but also has a lot of things that, you know, might get people interested that maybe want something different out of the genre, you know, like how did you go about building this world?
Yes, I love world building so much. It is one of my very favorite parts of the entire process of writing, editing, the whole thing. It's one of the reasons why I don't know that I could ever write like a contemporary novel, because there's research, and like to me it would be so hard to constrain myself to a real place that actually exists.
Right.
I like to just like invent my own lands and you know, people and systems and stuff. The main thing that I'll say about world building, and like and this is, you know, your mileage may vary, this is like my personal opinion, is like detail. I have every project I've written, I have a giant OneNote. I'm kind of like anal about organization, not in like the real world, as you can tell from this room, but in the computer, I'm very organized. But yeah, so I'll have tabs for like all my different countries and stuff. And I think that you need to create stuff that exists in your world that's never going to make it onto the page, that like only you know as the writer.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't feel real to you as the writer, like how in the world are you ever going to make it feel real?
How's it going to be convincing?
Readers? Yeah. So like some of the things, obviously like the basics, you need to know the geography of your world. I'm terrible at drawing, like the worst artist you've ever met. But I'll sketch out like a crappy map and like draw lines and like rivers and, you know, all that stuff. So I can kind of, you know, usually my characters are traveling, like the economy of the land and the political structure. So like how many kingdoms do you have, or groups or countries or whatever, and you know, who's friends with who and whatever. That's really fun to figure out. I also always make sure to like figure out some notable people and locations, just to kind of pepper in. So I always think like, you know, if you're talking in the real world and you say like, oh, it's colder than the North Pole out there or whatever, like people are going to know what you mean. You need an equivalent of something like that, so people can just like throw in references. It makes the world feel bigger than just the places where your characters are chilling right now. Trying to think what else, like religion, that's always a really fun one to build. I love building out religions. It's so much fun. Even if it's not going to be central in your story, it's going to influence the whole world. Yeah. Just on like a minor scale, like think about like your character gets frustrated. They're probably not going to say like, oh, Jesus Christ. Right. Like, but they're going to say something like, what's blasphemy in your world? Yeah. I don't know. All that kind of stuff is just super fun for me. And I find like inspiration images on, you know, Pinterest, just have a ball with it.
That's cool. I like I said, my favorite thing is world building, and again, not that this is a book, but the game I play, Destiny, is so full of lore, and I think I spent more time looking at the Art of Destiny books, and they're coming out with these lore books called grimoires, and there's 3 of them now, and they're probably about 400 pages long of just like stuff that you don't even see in the game, and I love reading that kind of stuff. And like going back to Lord of the Rings, like the Silmarillion, or you know, some of those extra books are just so good at building the world that you're never going to read about unless you like, you know,
you dig.
You know, it's very fascinating. That's my favorite part is the worlds. So yeah, that's cool. You know, like I told you, like this new project I'm working on again, this one character that I just like, every time I read what I've written, I go in and like fix things once in a while, and like I have like all this stuff about this character, about the history of this character, the background, where they come from, and it's like nobody's ever gonna read this, but this feels so real every time I read it that it's like, I want to go with this. I want to see like what happened. I want to see what happens with this character, and like that's so important to build all the stuff that you just described. And
super important for you to know that, even if the reader doesn't directly know it, like they're gonna know it when they read it. Yeah. Because the character is gonna feel like a person that existed before the book started, and a person that, assuming he survives, will continue to exist after the story. You know what I mean? Like they'll feel that you built that. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if the character does die, like the characters that move on might feel the effects of that character later, you know?
Absolutely.
Because death is a powerful tool if you build the character right, and you have characters that are emotionally attached to each other. And I think that's a lot of times. I think death is kind of overused as a storytelling mechanic, but when it's done right, and when it's done, with like if the characters are emotionally invested in this character, that makes me more emotionally invested in when that character is gone.
And it is a punch to the gut when they go. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Speaking of believable characters, how do you go about creating your characters? How do you make them believable outside of the world building? How do you give them character? How do you give them like attitudes and how do you decide how smart they're going to be? How naive they could be? Like how do you approach that when building the characters out?
Yeah, so again, returning to my giant OneNote document, I always have like a character like fact sheet that I start with that's like the basics, like how old is this character? Like what do they look like? Let me find an inspiration image so I can kind of get an idea of, their vibe. What skills or powers do they have if they're, and not necessarily like magical powers, like are they a super skilled negotiator, right? Like that's a power. And I list all of that stuff out first. So I kind of have like a skeleton of what the character looks like. And then the best part, I love this part of the process. It's super long and I may go overkill on it, probably just because I love it. But I interview my characters. So I'll get a list of like 50, 60 questions. And then I'll answer them for every single one of the characters on my like main cast. So I probably spend like 60 plus hours interviewing characters before I even set pen to paper for first draft. And the key with the interviewing is that you're answering in their voice. So like you're pretending to be that character as you answer. So like, would they answer this question outright, or would they be really snarky and lie to me, or, whatever the case is. I feel like that helps you, if you're going to be writing from their perspective when you're actually drafting, that helps you get their voice down. And then dialogue and stuff, you're going to need their voice anyway. But it really helps you kind of round them out and figure out, just how they kind of operate and how they would react in different situations. And then I got a really good piece of writing advice about character building I read it in a blog or something. I forget where I got this piece of advice. If I remember it, I will credit it when I repost this. But it was that to do a character arc, give your character a lie that they believe about themselves in the beginning. So have you watched Avatar: Last Airbender?
I've seen some of it, yeah.
Okay. I just rewatched it on Netflix. So it's fresh in my mind. But like there's the character Prince Zuko on that. And in the beginning, his like lie is that he believes that he's lost his honor and he needs to impress his father to get it back. And the only way he grows through a character arc is by learning the truth, which is that, his honor comes from within. So like the growth from believing the lie to understanding the truth. So I like to give every single one of my characters that I'm going to be doing like a full arc for, I give them all a lie at the beginning. So I can really start to get inside their heads and figure out what makes them tick.
That's interesting that you say that at this moment as I'm looking at my document right now. I mean, we can talk about it after because I don't want to give my idea away in case anybody's out there.
Keep that. Yeah, we can definitely talk about it after for sure.
Yeah, but it's interviewing your characters. That's a good one. That's awesome. I never even like considered that as like a writing process.
I hadn't either. I started reading like a ton of writing blogs about. I don't know, like 2 years, 1 year maybe into getting obsessed with trying to be a writer. And if you just Google character interview, you'll find like a ton of lists of questions. And that's what I do. I just like lift questions from those. So I have fresh questions every time I'm interviewing characters. So I don't get like, bored of the questions I'm asking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would totally recommend it because it's helpful, but also it's really fun.
That's cool. I never even really thought about that. I just always like, oh man, I wonder how these characters got so fleshed out, and I, like what I was doing was like, oh, I'm just gonna write like a couple page history of this character and like where they're from, what they like and dislike and stuff. And interview is actually like a really smart way of doing that. So
yeah, well, I mean, and everyone does it differently. Like, I'll say there's no like one true path to writing a book.
Right.
So I'm sure that not everyone, does the character interviews. But if that sounds like something, that would be interesting or fun, like you should totally do it. I think it's fun. I think it's a good time.
I do, like, when I come up with an idea for like a character, just all right, this is gonna be really just like childish and really, out there. But when a few years, like probably like 10 years ago, when I was working at a restaurant, me and my friends were like, I was working on this cartoon kind of like based off The Office called We Work Together. And it was about the things that were happening in the restaurant, but like really over the top and really stupid and silly and stuff. And like I would, this like I had probably like 5 episodes almost done, and then me and my friend who I was living with at the time, our apartment burned down and I lost everything, and I just like never restarted the project.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's terrible.
Yeah. Sure. But it was really cool because like it was really the first kind of creative endeavor that I like set out to do, and it was really funny because it was all about the in jokes and stuff. People that didn't work with us probably wouldn't get a lot of them, or only people that like really worked in restaurants would understand some of the jokes. But it was really,
to say that's a big population.
Yeah,
I think plenty of people would have gotten it probably.
Yeah, but like it was funny because like I was doing all the voices in the show, and like I would do the voices of my friends and stuff, and they're like, and I showed it to some of them, and they're like, "What is this voice you have for me? This is awful." I'm like, "This is what you sound like in an over-the-top cartoon version of yourself. This is what you're going to sound like. This is how it's happening."
This is a mirror. Sorry, it's not flattering.
Yeah. So it was that was a fun little project that I did, but like just after that, my friends and I were like, how do we make some kind of dumb cartoon type thing? How do we write this? What do we do? And this is gonna sound really childish, but we were gonna do like a adult take on a children's cartoon. So we came up with this idea called Sweaty Spaghetti and His Friends, and it was about this spaghetti who was like, he always looked like he was sweating, but it was because he had oil and stuff, because he's spaghetti, he was just kind of like, and he had his friend like Timmy the toothpaste, and like there was a whole section of like somebody learning how to brush their teeth, and then it went into like sex ed and stuff, and it was like we had this character called Kenny the Condom, and he was always broken, like something on him was always broken. It was just like this really terrible thing, but it was a really fun like creative exercise on how to, because comedy is kind of like what I like, I mean, I'm more of like I like the action movies with like a little bit of like a romance story woven in, but I like when there's comedy involved, like I like a good action comedy type thing, and that's kind of what my idea was. And like it was a good exercise on comedy, and like, how do you do this right? How do you do what's the wrong way to do this? And it there's a lot of trial and error, obviously, as you know, as you said at the top of the show. That's
like,
yeah,
it's half of it's not being afraid to like try something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but also going through those few small projects that I was working on, writing this one character that I've been working on, it was a interesting exercise on, okay, how do I involve this one aspect of this into this character? How do I take away from this cartoon that I was making and making this a character that people believe in and care about and stuff? So that was
cannibalizing past projects, man. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, the lead character from my debut appeared in that first terrible novel that I wrote. So, like, it's so important. Like, you already spent the time. You already put the work in creating this thing. And just because the whole piece didn't work doesn't mean a few of the, little puzzle pieces.
Right. Yeah.
Workable somewhere else.
Yeah. Speaking of, I saw a very in particular tweet on your thread. I don't know if it's going to come up or not, but what is the hardest thing you've ever had to write? Like, as you were going through this process, like, I saw a tweet. I want to know if it comes up. If it doesn't, I won't bring it up. But it was. I laughed. I was like, "This is funny. This might."
Yes. Well, I yeah. So there are a lot of things that are difficult. What comes to mind is just like all of it.
All of it.
Like the whole first draft is just hard. If we're talking about like things that are particularly difficult. So I know the tweet you're referencing. So I had written a scene yesterday that was like an emotionally vulnerable scene for two characters. And that was super challenging. Because as I said in the tweet, like that's not a strong suit of like me as a human in general. It's like, let's be super emotionally vulnerable. Like, nope, not so much. But also the characters that I had in this particular scene, like both of them were like super closed off, like type characters. So that was a big challenge to write for sure. Also, the other thing that I find really difficult and like I hate writing, but I love editing is fight sequences. So anytime I have to write a fight sequence, like most of the time I'm writing it, I'm just sitting like, because I'm trying to picture the choreography in my head so that I can translate it onto the page because I have to make sure that the steps they're taking work and like, okay, if they parried here, no, but then their sword would be up here
and then when you
can't, you know.
And then when you finish writing it, you got to make sure that the reader is like making sense of all the moves that they're making and stuff. That's like, it's got to be so hard because I thought about that. I was like, how would you even write an action scene? Like when you watch a movie or something, I'm like, how do they even write that? How do they even know that that's what's going to happen?
It's super hard. It's super hard. Like I have seen writers on Twitter that, you know, I'm mutuals with talk about like, oh my gosh, I love writing fight sequences. I'm so excited to write this fight sequence. And I'm like, can I just like pay you to write all my fight sequences for me? Because, you know, we get it done, but it's not easy.
Yeah, it sounds like honestly, that sounds like a nightmare to write. I mean, like, okay, this person's going to swing here. Is this person going to dodge? Like, or are they going to lift? You know, and just following that just sounds like a...
Yes, well, and then making it not boring. Because if it's just a bunch of people, like, swinging and blocking, like, that can look exciting maybe on the screen. But in, you know, writing form, that's super boring. So, like, no, let's add, you know, another element. And, like, we need some dialogue in here and da-da-da. Yeah. So yeah, it's fun to add it once it's like there and ugly. It's fun to make it pretty, but getting that first ugly version there is not my favorite.
Yeah, I remember I was watching this one movie and the script was at the bottom and it was this huge like fight scene and the script just said sword fight. Those were the only two words. I'm like, got it.
Damn it! I knew I should have been a screenwriter. Come on, missed opportunity.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of get to the last topic here. Obviously, we are here to kind of promote your book, Among Thieves, your first published book. I'm very excited for you. That's such an accomplishment. I kind of want to know, you know, what's this book about? I mean, obviously we'll get into everything, but like what is this book about for people who didn't read your website 3 times to make sure they got it right interviewing you?
Yes, so for everyone else in the audience here. So the book's called Among Thieves. It is a fantasy heist, and the premise is it's a group of thieves that they all come together to steal a magical artifact. But every single one of them is planning on betraying all of the others. So each one has their own little plans and machinations where they're trying to basically screw over all the people that they're working with.
That sounds like a real kind of almost
knitting things together.
yeah, that sounds like you gave yourself an even bigger puzzle to, let alone writing a book, but you have to now make all these pieces connect because you have all these characters that are gonna, you know, one up each other or whatever. So how did you even come up with that idea? Did you watch a lot of like mystery movies? Like we just watched Knives Out and we were kind of like trying to figure that movie out. And
oh, that movie was so good. I loved that movie.
It is quite good. It is quite good.
Would recommend. Obviously, everyone knows
it's on Amazon Prime, by the way, for free. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was on... Oh, I forget. Well, I think we just rented it on the Xbox when we watched it. But yeah, so what novels. So like Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo is a good one, and obviously Lies of Locke Lamora, and it's a whole series. It's the Gentleman Bastard series. And then films, Ocean's 11. I just love the idea of a heist, a bunch of people like coming together to pull like a big scam is super interesting to me. But then I always kind of thought when I was watching the movies and reading these books, the kinds of people that were having worked together for these heists, they're all like thieves, right? They're looking to steal something. And so it was always kind of strange to me that like nobody's going to betray, like they're all actually going to be buddies and actually work together, which, I mean, clearly they're going for a big score and it's in their interest to work together, sure. But like, what if they didn't?
Yeah.
all work together. Was
when's
kind of
the other
thought.
foot going to drop, on these?
Right. So like, what if all of them really did have their own little plans where they're like, oh, I'm just going to use all these other guys and really get my payout.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where that idea came from. And I just kind of ran with it from there.
That's awesome. Cause like you said, you watch these heist movies and stuff and you're like, I think The Italian Job is at the beginning of that movie, at least, is like not that that's like the best heist movie of all time or anything, but at the beginning, Edward Norton. Spoilers for The Italian Job if you haven't. It's like 20 years old at this point.
If you haven't seen it, it's your fault at this point.
Yeah. Edward Norton kind of screws them all over at the beginning, and then it becomes the second heist becomes stealing the first heist back from Edward Norton, which is really. I was like, why don't movies do this more? It's kind of like. Why don't like it? It would be awesome to watch a heist movie, and because they're all kind of like the same. The bad guys are the guys that you're rooting for, technically, and none of them they all seem to be like best friends, especially in the Ocean's 11 series. And
yeah, Oceans for sure. Which I love Oceans.
Yeah, I do too.
Not talking any crap on Oceans.
I even liked the new one, the one with Sandra Bullock and.
Yes, I liked that one too. I kind of went into it because like remakes, I'm always kind of like, oh, do we have to reboot everything? Can we make something original?
Right.
But I actually really liked Ocean's 8 as well. It was
good. I'm like. It would actually be surprising if one of these other characters would be like, haha, you guys suck, I'm taking it all, It's just like,
right,
why?
Deuces, I'm out of here.
Right. So, but, we kind of talked about how you came up with the idea. We talked about your process of getting your book published and stuff, but how did you go about, like, editing the book? Like, do you personally edit the book? Or do you have like a second set of eyes that looks at it? Do you have a professional editor that kind of looks at it? Or is it kind of a combination of the three?
Yeah, it's a combination of all of that. So for Thieves, I probably did like 10 drafts or more by myself first. Because like I said, it was really twisty and there were a lot of moving parts and it took a long time to like get all the pieces, like close up all the plot holes that I had built. And then after that, so I use beta readers, which are, they can be friends or family, but it's usually best if they're like randos, because friends or family might be, nice and not tell you what's wrong with it. So I found some beta readers on Twitter, actually, which the Twitter writing community is literally why I'm on Twitter, which now I like Twitter for other things, but that was why I joined. It was because I didn't know at the time any writers in real life. But yeah, I found some beta readers there, had them read it, give me their notes, more drafts, and then I sent it to my agent, and then we did at least 5 drafts together. And then now I'm in the middle of revisions with my editor at the publisher. So, yes, if you want to write a book, which I know you do, and you can totally do it, and I'm not trying to discourage you, I promise, but like get ready for a billion drafts.
Yeah, no, that's part of the, like, even my cousin, when he published his book, he was like, I wrote like 15 drafts of this thing, and like some of the book I just completely rewrote because I just wasn't happy with the other part that I was writing, and it's I see it on my friends that write, and I'm like, okay, let's buckle in, let's do it, let's just strap in for like a 5-year kind of
for like it's like a multi-year process. But if you look at it in the good way, it's like okay to screw up because you always have another draft where you can fix it. I mean, obviously up until the point when it's published,
right?
But until that point, endless drafts.
Yeah. So also, like, how did you kind of? I mean, obviously, writers don't really like start at chapter 1 and then write all the way through to the end. Especially something that you're writing. Did you like know the ending when you started, did you like kind of start with the end and then work your way backwards? Like, how do you fit all these kind of twists and turns into this puzzle without kind of giving anything away? Because it's just super fascinating. Like, okay, I know the ending. Do I write the ending and then work backwards? You know, like it's, man, these kind of books are just.
I have seen so many different processes that people have. So like do you know the ending before you start? Like there are 2 basic schools of writers, for any folks that are like more unfamiliar. So there's plotters, who are the ones that like have an outline and, you know, you kind of know exactly the roadmap you're taking. And then there's a kind of writer, they're called pantsers, which is like from the seat of your pants, where they literally just create the book as they go. I will say I tried pantsing once and I ended up with about like 20,000 completely unusable words because they were going nowhere.
Right.
It's a super awesome method. I like George R.R. Martin is a pantser. Like it's not like the good people are this and the bad writers are that. And it's like literally just your personality.
Right. I'm definitely not a pantser. I would definitely not be that. Yeah, I would need like a 5-page outline of like, okay, here's what's happening here. Here's what's happening here.
Yes.
I could not.
Yeah. I have an Excel sheet is what I make. So I'm like super crazy. And I have every single chapter is a row. And then the columns are like my plots and my subplots and my character arcs. And I just kind of like highlight and color code and make sure everything lines up before I get started. So yeah, I usually know everything that is supposed to happen. And then of course, like as you're drafting, you find out that something that was supposed to happen in your outline is actually super unrealistic now that you're, in the depth of the story. And then that's when you have to fix stuff in edits. But yeah, I know Victoria Schwab, if you know her, she writes a bunch of her scenes out of order. And she's obviously, she knows what she's doing. She has like 20 books. I can't imagine doing it that way. So I actually genuinely do start at chapter 1 and I write all the way through till I reach the end of the book. Yeah. But I know a ton of people that do it totally different ways. That's the most frustrating thing about learning to write a book as someone who's like super like type A organized, is that there isn't like a right answer. Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, this is how I do it, but try your own thing. Yeah,
it really just kind of sounds like whatever your creative mind tells you to do, that's what you should probably kind of work towards. Like you said, pantsing just sounds like a terrible way to write a book.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know how they do it. I know a ton of people that are, and then it stinks for them because when you get into the like you're actually working with a publisher, a lot of times like once you're past book 1, they'll want like just an outline for book 2 to give you a deal. And like I've been talking to some of my friends that are also debuting the same year that I am, and they're like, I'm trying to write this outline and I'm dying. And I'm like, ooh, this is where this is my time to shine as a plotter. I'm ready.
I just couldn't imagine, like, especially if you have like a B and C plot that are going on kind of at the same time, or you know what I mean?
Well,
especially
George R.R. Martin. He has like plots A through Z. Yeah. And I don't know how he does it. He must be like, I mean, he is obviously a genius, but good Lord.
Yeah, I couldn't even, I was like, I would need to like really focus on like, okay, I need to make sure that this plot doesn't interfere with this plot, doesn't interfere with this, and how are we going to get here from like how are we going to merge the A and B plot at some point? Like, it just sounds like a, whew. So, but yeah, Among Thieves, your book, do you want to kind of, I know you're kind of under contractual things and everything, but is there anything else you want to talk about the book before we kind of talk about when it's coming out and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just like kind of pitch it a little bit. If you are interested in obviously heists, if you're interested in, swearing, there's a lot of swearing in the book. So if you're not
cool,
if you're not cool,
I like a good swear
with the F-bomb, then maybe don't pick this one up. But like if you like, kind of badass female characters, like my cast is more than half female, which is important for me as a fantasy writer because a lot of times females, less so nowadays, it's evening out, but a lot of times females are pretty underrepresented. I've got, some sword fights, and there's, some cool twisty magic systems, and everybody's a bad guy.
Everybody's a party.
So there you go.
That's cool. I just from the short time I've known you, I've gone from knowing nothing about this book to being like, okay, I'm ready for this book. I want to read it. And coming from someone who doesn't read as much as I probably want to or should, you know, I'm gonna go after this one. So
yay! Well, thank you.
Yeah. So when can we expect your book? Sometime next year, early next year, or like?
So it's supposed to come out February 2021. I don't have an official release date yet. I'm hoping that holds. I know a lot of stuff is getting pushed back though because of Corona. So if if anyone wants to, keep track of when it might come out, you can follow me on Twitter. That's where I post updates. I mean, I also post like memes and my political opinions and stuff too. So
yeah,
grain of salt with whether you want to do that.
Pictures of cool mugs and glasses too.
Yes, all that kind of stuff.
Gotta ask, when you write, are you a coffee writer or are you a wine writer?
I'm a coffee writer.
Okay.
I have never written while drunk, and I am afraid to try it because I'm afraid it would go really well.
Yeah.
And then I would want to do it more.
Right. Yeah, because some of the writers that I kind of follow are like, sometimes I see like these things pop up. They're like, you're either a coffee writer or you're a wine writer, and I'm like, is that a thing? Is that a thing? Is that a thing? So, I thought I had to ask that question. So,
I like it. Yes, aspiring wine writer. No.
Yeah. That should be like in your bio on Twitter. Right? Aspiring wine writer.
Tag that at the end of the Twitter bio. You're like, what is that?
If this book does well, maybe you're not allowed to say anything, but are you planning on this becoming like a series, or are you going to try something new after this book is done?
So I will just say that I know what happened. So, if there's a market for a sequel, I would definitely, be interested in taking something like that on. But I'm going to say both because I also have another project in the works right now that is totally unrelated, and I'm super stoked about it. It's like an adventure fantasy trilogy that I'm working on. So, both.
Awesome. Yeah, that's cool. I'm really glad that I reached out to you to be on this show because, like I kind of told you before, this week in particular is kind of packed with this type of show. We used to try to get one of these out a month, and now it's kind of like we're debating on giving it its own podcast feed because it's been kind of a really cool evolution of our kind of podcast style. So I'm really glad that I reached out to you and to be on this show. It's selfishly, it's been really a learning experience for me, and I'm really excited for you and your book, and hopefully, like I told you, we as a podcast group and our staff we're going to promote the book for you when it comes out, give you the whole thing, a minute runtime at the top of the show, banners on our website and everything. So like I told you, and whenever it's close to coming out or pre-orders are up or whatever, you just let me know and we'll get all that ready for you.
Thank you so much. I super appreciate it. I'm so glad you reached out too, because this has been such a cool opportunity for me.
Yeah.
To meet you guys and start, chatting about my book, which I'll always do that.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got other things kind of in the works that maybe we would like you to be involved in the future, if you would be on like a one-off show or like a mini series of shows about, writing and creativity and women in the creative space too. So
yeah, very cool. Yeah, well, you know where to find me. So
yeah, I know where to find you. But if you want people to follow you and follow your book, where can they follow you at?
Yeah, so mostly you can find me on Twitter. I'm super active on Twitter. It's at MJ_Kuhn. That's Kuhn. And then I do have a Facebook page as well. So that's just MJ Kuhn Books, all one word at the end of the URL.
Cool. Yeah, and obviously in the description of this video and the podcast, the links will be underneath as well. So you can just click them and go follow her, like her, and comment on her book and stuff. So yeah, I'm very happy that you came on. I'm glad we did this, and I can't wait to talk to you more about this in the future. We're gonna wrap this episode though. Thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. You can find me on Twitter. I am CoreyNHD on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find me on Twitch and Mixer at CoreyNHD for all of our live shows and that kind of stuff. So Mallory, thank you for joining me on this episode of 1v1.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you can find it on the Boss Rush podcast feed every Friday, a new guest about what they're doing creatively, and we will see you next Friday. Goodbye, everybody.